It's 5 after, so we're going to go ahead and get started, guys. Thanks for coming out for the second awesome JavaScript event in November. Today, James Simpson is going to talk about Howler.js, audio library he made for his game at GoldFire Studios. Pizza and drinks are by Robert Half. This is Lucas from Robert Half. If you want to say a couple words.
Yes. So I just want to say hi. It's nice to see most of you again and the new faces. Obviously, IT recruiter, that's why I've got a suit on. I've worked with a lot of the folks in this room. That's my counterpart over there in the corner, Lauren. We're working a ton of jobs right now, and anybody is looking for really anything. Could be web design or development. It could be, you're looking for a JavaScript job, you want something else. Come give us a shout. And if you're a manager in the room and you're looking for people, give me a shout too. We'd love to talk to you about it. Also, if you want to talk about like your favorite newest Steam game or something, I want to talk about that too. So come find me. Come find me after the meeting today, and yeah, let's figure out what we can do together. Thanks, guys.
All right, James, take it.
All right. Well. Again, my name is James Simpson, and so what I'm going to be talking about is Howler.js, which is a JavaScript audio library that I wrote earlier this year. And I guess just a quick raise of hands, how many of you have used or heard of Howler? Anyone? Yeah. Okay, about half of you it looks like. That's good. Well, sort of the way we're going to go through this is, first I'm going to talk about sort of background of Howler, what it is, especially for those of you that don't know. And then we're going to go through some real-world examples of projects using Howler, and also go through some code samples of how to use Howler and how to use audio in the browser in general. And then we're going to talk about the future of Howler.js and audio in the browser. So this is pretty informal. If you've got any questions along the way, want any clarification, anything like that, feel free to just shout it out, interrupt me, it's fine. And I'll be happy to talk about whatever. So for those of you that don't know who I am, I just want to give a quick background on myself. So that's me. I make games, and that's my character in one of our newest games. We like to put our team members in our games, so that's what our awesome artist made for me. And I've been making games and other web apps since I was around 13 years old. I sold my first game at the age of 14, and so ever since then, I've been sort of doing this as a business. And projects that I've built have reached millions of people around the world, and actually include one of the world's top 100 websites, AdFly. So if you've ever seen those really annoying full-page ads before a short link you click on, sorry, that was my fault. I don't do that anymore, though. It's just games for me. But what I do now is I'm the CEO and founder of GoldFire Studios, which is a local game development studio. We've actually got an office just up the road in downtown. Our CTO is here as well, Luke, back there in the corner. And last fall, we were in this space right here as part of the first class of Venture Spur. And so our focus is on HTML5 browser-based games. So we code JavaScript all day, every day, server and the client. So we do Node.js on the back end as well. And our focus beyond that is really about real-time community-based gameplay. So we do a lot of things with cool technologies like WebSockets, again, Node, MongoDB, things like that. So last year we launched our social gaming platform, and then this year, or for about the last year and a half, we've been working on a game called Casino RPG, which is canvas-based, all HTML5. I'll show it here in a little bit as an example of Howler. And we launched that into open beta about 2.5 months ago. So that's my background. What about the background of audio in the browser? Well, if any of you have tried to make any web apps with audio not using Howler, you know it's quite a bit of a challenge, and especially around the time when Howler first came out, it was even more of a challenge. It's starting to get better, but I'll talk about that more a little bit later. A few of the main issues especially deal with fragmentation. So there's two types of fragmentation with browser audio. The first one is with codec support. So some browsers support MP3, some don't, some support OGG, so on and so forth. And in order to get cross-browser compatibility when you're playing audio in the browser, you've got to have at least 2 different types of file formats for your audio. And generally speaking, you've got to load both of those and then play the one that works in that browser. That's not exactly an ideal situation. The other side of fragmentation is with the type of browser audio that's implemented. So most browsers now do support HTML5 audio, but not so many of them. It's getting better, but not as many of them support Web Audio API. So for example, when Howler first came out, Firefox didn't support Web Audio API. Thankfully, I think it's the latest or the second to latest version of Firefox now has full Web Audio support. So things are advancing there quite nicely. And then another area of challenge is with mobile. So not only is the performance for audio on mobile quite a bit worse, obviously, than desktop, but it actually behaves differently really in each and every mobile browser than on desktop browsers. A specific example of that would be if you're using HTML5 audio in mobile browsers, most of them, you can only play one sound at a time, which is pretty limiting for most applications. So, again, for those of you that don't know what Howler.js is, I'm going to give a quick background on it and sort of what you can do with Howler.js. So, the way that Howler came about, let's see, it's around January of this year, February. We were actually in the middle of our Kickstarter campaign for Casino RPG, and up to that point we'd mainly been focused on the visual aspects of the game just to sort of get our video out there for the campaign. But around halfway, near the end of the campaign, we decided it was time to start working on sound effects, background music, things like that. And so we started looking at implementing audio with plain old JavaScript, the tools that are available to us. We started running into these challenges I was mentioning. And so we assumed there would be an open source library out there that could handle these issues for us, but we looked everywhere, there was nothing available. So I was particularly interested in the audio side of things, and so I decided to make a weekend project out of trying to solve these issues for us in Casino RPG, and out of that weekend, Howler was born. So it was working pretty well for us in Casino RPG, and we decided to go ahead and throw it up open source on our GitHub page. Figured there might be a few people that that'd be interested in using Howler, and as it turns out, there were quite a few people. Quickly shot to #1 on Hacker News, Reddit. Thousands of blogs covered it. We were getting literally thousands of tweets about it. So it was pretty overwhelming for that first week or so, and pretty exciting to see the response from the community and be able to help out in that way. And by the end of the first week, Howler had become the top starred JavaScript audio library in all of GitHub. So it still remains at that point, and continued developing on it, and been getting just amazing contributions from people all over the world. So it's been really cool to see all the creative things people have built with Howler, and we hope to see that going forward. So specifically what Howler does, there's some basic features that I've sort of outlined here. The main idea from the beginning was that it defaults to Web Audio API, and then it falls back to HTML5 audio. So there's no Flash used, there's no plugins or anything like that. It's all native browser JavaScript. And the reason for that is Web Audio API is extremely performant. It's got really powerful features to do all sorts of things with audio in the browser. And then HTML5 audio also is nice, but it's not as performant, and it doesn't have near as many features. Some other features, auto loads and plays the correct file format. So again, that's determining if the browser can support an MP3 and plays the MP3 or OGG or whichever formats you'd like to use. Things like automatic caching and pooling of sounds, per sound and global controls. So for example, you can mute globally, or you can mute one sound, or play, things like that. One of the most popular features is sound sprites, which I'll show an example of that when I get into some of the code examples. And basically what sound sprites are, it's what it sounds like. It's the same as CSS image sprites, but it's with an audio file. So the benefit there is, well, number one, on mobile, you get better performance playing specific sounds, especially with sound effects. But it also, same advantages with image sprites. You only have to make one HTTP request. Then you also have the basic playback features. You can use this for something as simple as just playing one sound, or a lot more advanced layering sounds and things like that. So play, pause, mute, fade, loop, so on and so forth. A cool feature that sort of came along probably during the summer, was not originally intended for Howler, is 3D positional sound. And this is a web audio feature that lets you actually do 3D sound like you would see in more advanced games or things like that. That's something, well, I'll talk about that more at the end, but that's something that's going to get fleshed out more moving forward. And one of the really important things was no outside libraries. So you don't need like jQuery or anything like that to use Howler. You just drop it in your project and you can use it anywhere. And then obviously lots of cross-browser audio, bug fixes, and just differences. Smooths out those differences, lets you use that one simple API, and you know it's going to work in all browsers. So this sort of goes back to the point where Howler sort of blew up all over the place, which was really surprising for us, and it was our first open source project we'd posted, so we certainly intend to continue doing that in the future. It's great just to be able to give back to the community, and from a selfish standpoint, we get a lot of contributors helping us making the audio in our game better. Some notable projects that have used Howler: there's been some Disney mobile games that used Howler, a really cool Walking Dead TV show feature, which I'll show here in a little bit. A few bands used Howler for launch websites for new albums like Jimmy Eat World and Trivium. And we've literally had hundreds of developers tweet us cool little projects they've built using Howler. And we get a few more of those each week, so that's just really cool to see. Okay, I'm going to show a few examples of Howler in use in production. So what's loading up here is Casino RPG. This is, again, the game that we built and are currently building at GoldFire Studios. Let's see if you can hear any of the audio. So again, this is a canvas-based HTML5 JavaScript game. It's a multiplayer game. See, maybe we'll see someone else walking around. As you can see, we're using the two types of audio. So the background music is using HTML5 audio, and with Howler you can switch. By default, it uses web audio, but you can tell it to use which one you want for specific circumstances. So, for example, for background audio, they're large audio files. What we found is web audio is not the best for large audio files, and the reason for that is the way web audio works is it actually does an XHR request, and it downloads the raw audio data for your music or your sound file, and it then decodes that in the browser before it can play back anything. So the first problem with that is with a large, 5-10 megabyte music file, it's going to take a little while before it even starts playing. And the second issue is it's probably going to crash your browser. We found that out after we'd already deployed during our closed beta, and everyone's browsers were crashing. So the best practice there is to force HTML5 audio, which lets you stream the music so it starts playing a lot more quickly. And then all these other sound effects using Web Audio API. So it looks like no one's walking around in this area right now, but move on to the next example. Okay, so this is the Walking Dead feature I was talking about. We'll just scroll through this real quick. This is doing the same thing where it plays the background music with HTML5 audio. And then they've got some cool little sound effects mixed in. Has anyone? I've never seen this show. I guess it's pretty good. Has anyone seen this? Yeah. I just thought their feature was cool. But so you turn into a zombie. It looks like. All right. Anyway, next. And so Howler can be used. Here's another game example. Howler doesn't just have to be used for games. That's obviously what we use it for. But we see lots of examples of all sorts of things. We'll see if I can figure out how to pull this up. Wow. Apparently I suck at this game. All right, next example. Okay, so this is one of the non-game examples. This is a pretty cool site. It actually teaches musical notation, which I know nothing about, but I thought it was a cool example. Pretty basic, but they do have some more complex playback modes. I'm not sure how to get to them, but that just sort of gives you an idea. Each one of those notes is, or that, I guess it's called a bar or something, is one sprite, and so they actually, for each set of notes, they make a sound sprite and then use Howler's sprite functionality to play that. Alright, this is an awesome game called JS Jump. No relation to Kevin Durant's favorite game. It's, I don't remember who made this. This isn't something on the, well, it is on the web, but this is where I'm going to go into some code examples. And there's a link. You can get to these slides at GoldFireStudios.com. I'll probably post it on the Google+, yeah. But there's a link there to the GitHub source for this. Basically, it was a Doodle Jump clone in JavaScript. Then I made a few tweaks to make it more JavaScripty. And I thought I'd make a good example. So it's pretty cool. You can play it just like the regular game. But if you notice, it's a little dull without any sound. So we're going to figure out how to change that. Okay, let me reload. So you got a few different options to add sound to our JS Jump game. First option is to use HTML5 audio. This is obviously the option that's supported by most browsers, but again, it's less performant. Well, I'll go into the issues here in a minute, but HTML5 audio, it's got a really nice API actually. It's really easy to set up and get playing. You just create your audio object and you pass it the source to your audio file. Again, the problem with this is, for example, in this sample, can you all see the code at all? Okay. We're loading the MP3 file. So now that Firefox supports that, most browsers will be able to play that, but you're not going to get full cross-browser support. You'd actually need, well, generally it's best to do an MP3 and an OGG. So once you've loaded that in, you can set a few basic parameters like volume, and then you simply play it. Now again, this is just a super basic example where you're just playing one sound once. And again, there's issues with this, limited control. You basically can just play, pause, mute, and you've got some seeking control, but it's not super precise. Again, there's the cross-browser issues with the codec support. It's not, depending on what your use case is, if you want a lot of sound effects going, it's not going to work particularly well for that. And again, on mobile, you can't play multiple sounds at once using HTML5 audio. So your next option is to use the Web Audio API, which is really awesome. It's got a lot of powerful features that you can use to do all sorts of cool stuff. But with all that power, obviously comes a lot more complexity. So this sample here is doing the exact same thing as the HTML5 audio sample. I'll just go through this quickly, what's going on here. So when you're doing Web Audio API, the first thing you do is you have to create your gain node, which is just create gain. And I'm actually missing something here. You actually need an audio context before this, but we'll just pretend like that's there. So what the gain node is essentially connects your audio source to your speakers so you can hear the audio. That's where you control things like the volume. And we're in a little method here that'll load your audio file. And so again, like I said, it's an XHR request. It loads an array buffer, which is your raw audio source. And what you're going to do with that is you pass it into decode audio data, which will then give you that audio buffer, which you can use to manipulate, again, do things like filters, mixing, positional sound, all sorts of cool stuff. But for our purposes, we're just going to connect that to the gain node, and then we start it, or play. So again, this is all of this just to, all of that just to play one simple sound. Any questions about how that's working or what's going on there? No? Okay. So let's look at how you do it with Howler. So instead of just doing that super basic sample with Howler, this is actually going to be all the code you need to add in all the sounds for a JS jump game. So the first one here, your sound variable, is all of your sound effects. So in order to play a sound with Howler, you just create a howl object and you pass in the parameters. So the first one you're always going to pass in is URLs, which is an array of source URLs. Again, pass in an MP3 and an OGG. The library is going to figure out which format can be played in that browser, and it's going to play that. It's going to load that one and play that one. Then we're also defining a sprite here. So these are those sound sprites I was talking about. In order to define that, you essentially, it's just an object. You give each sprite a name for easy playback later, and then you give it an array, which first is the starting position within that sound file in milliseconds, and then the second is the duration in milliseconds. So pretty similar to how you do it with an image, just in a linear audio format. Also, we want to do background music. So again, we create another howl object. We pass in the URLs. This time we're setting buffer to true, which forces HTML5 audio because it's a larger audio file and we don't need that precision playback. And we're also going to make it loop so that our audio keeps looping in the background. So then to play these, for our sound sprites, we simply do sound.play, pass in the name of the sound sprite, and that sound's going to play. And you can play these over and over on top of each other. It doesn't matter. Howler's going to handle the playback pool and everything automatically for you. And then for the background music, it's the same deal, but we can also chain the methods. So in this case, we're going to do stop before play, just in case we happen to accidentally play the background music multiple times. We don't want that playing on top of each other. So let's stick this into our JS jump game. See what happens. Well, the game that I was showing previously actually already had all that code in there, but I just globally muted it. So all we're going to have to do is jump back over there and do Howler unmute. So that spelled out full Howler is your global space where you can control everything globally. So there we go. We've got some very undoodle jump sounds going here. Alright. So as you see, it's a little more interesting and extremely annoying with these sound effects, but it gives you an idea how easy it is to stick some sounds into the game or whatever you're working on very easily. Let's see if I can lose now. Okay. So that's a quick example. Again, Howler.js isn't just for games. That's just sort of an easy example to use. But we see all sorts of cool ideas for different kinds of web apps that can use audio from just simple UI sounds to all the way to really complex 3D positional sound like what we use in Howler. Okay. Okay, so that's where Howler's at right now. Now I want to talk a little bit about the future of Howler and the future of audio in the browser. So as I mentioned a little bit, audio in the browser has been progressing quite a bit since just earlier this year. Again, Firefox now fully supports Web Audio API. the mobile browsers are continuing to advance and improve audio as well. The main holdout, as you would expect, is Internet Explorer. To, I guess, no one's surprise, Internet Explorer 11 for some reason still does not support Web Audio API, even though it supports WebGL. Not sure why they did that, but that's an unfortunate side effect. Hopefully, we just see their browser share continue to drop. That would be nice. But ignoring Internet Explorer, the future of audio in the browser is obviously with the Web Audio API, and that's also going to be the future of Howler.js. So Web Audio API, if you haven't looked at really everything it's got, it really comes really close to being a desktop-grade audio engine. It's just pretty complex. The API is not exactly fun to use. And so Howler 2, it's currently in planning right now. There's a lot of contributors actually helping with that in the GitHub issue tracker right now, planning out the API. I'm also doing work on this in-house, planning out Howler 2. And Howler 2 will very much be a breaking update. The API is going to be rewritten from the ground up to really shift the focus to being a full audio engine for the browser, for doing, again, still the same goal, everything from simple, very simple playback up to really advanced stuff. And this will allow us to do full 3D positional audio. Right now it's essentially a left and right speaker, but we're talking full 3D sound with velocity and all sorts of cool things there, filtering, mixing, etc., etc. And essentially Howler 2 will be a total rewrite from the ground up in order to streamline the API. A lot of things, the feature set that Howler launched with was extremely basic. And again, as I said, there's been a lot of awesome contributors, a lot of new features have sort of made their way into Howler over the last, 8-9 months. And that's going to be reassessed with all of the things that we've learned along the way to build the next version of Howler. No sort of ETA on that, no coding has really begun on that. It's still in the planning stages, but that's something to look forward to, and hopefully as the browsers keep pushing web audio forward. So if that's something you want to try out yourself or contribute, help with planning for the API, anything like that, you can check it out at Howlerjs.com. You can find out more about GoldFire Studios at GoldFireStudios.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GoldFire Studios. And now if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask away. I'm happy to answer anything. Yeah.
This isn't a question, it's just a comment. I want to say that historically finding good cross-platform, portable open source libraries for audio, at least for native games, has always been really tough. And so having a good audio library for games is actually really a nice thing to have, and something that historically has been really hard to find.
Yeah, and that's sort of what we noticed. I mean, there were a lot of JavaScript audio libraries out there, but most of them either weren't feature complete, they just simply didn't work, they used Flash, which we didn't want to use Flash, or they just completely ignored Web Audio API, which I think was a big mistake, because that's obviously where everything's going, and that's what gives you all the power and the tools to do a lot more advanced stuff. Yep. Yep.
So what's the browser support?
Do it?
What's the browser
the browser support right now is pretty much any Chrome version. Let's see, Firefox, technically Firefox 4 Plus, because it's got HTML5 audio. As long as the browser has HTML5 audio, it's supported. So most mobile browsers, not counting Opera, are supported. Opera on the desktop, though, Safari, and Internet Explorer 9 Plus. Yeah, so it's going to support the same browsers. It's just a lot of the new features won't be supported in the older browsers. So since there's going to be a new focus on really building in more of the Web Audio API features, those will only be supported in the Web Audio mode. So if you have to fall back to HTML5 audio, it'll gracefully fall back, but it won't have the things like 3D audio and things like that.
What do you use to make your sound sprites?
So we use Audacity and just sort of do it manually. Let's see, I might be able to find it here. There's someone made a tool that'll actually combine them, and then there's a plugin for Howler that'll spit out the code for that. Let's see if I think I start it on here. But yeah, I mean, if you've just got a few audio files, it's pretty easy just to do it on Audacity. The key is you want to put a 1 second buffer in between each sound. Basically, especially for mobile, because the precision won't be as high, and so you don't want your sounds overlapping. Well, I'm not sure what that other program was. If I find it, I'll post it on the Google Plus page.
So how do you account for that, or overcome that lack of precision in mobile for your sound sprite? Do you just like tell it that the sound starts at 2 seconds in, or it actually starts at 2.2 seconds? So you build that into your sprite, or?
Generally we still define them right where it starts and stops. Mainly the problem is when you have to fall back to HTML5 audio. That's when it's not going to start as precise, or start and stop. But usually what we've seen is it'll start pretty accurately and it'll just go over. And so that's where you need that buffer. The main thing is you don't want, usually your entire sound will play, but if you don't have enough buffer, you'll end up hearing the start of the next sound, which sort of throws things off. There is one issue we've run into that we still haven't figured out yet. I think it's Chrome on Android, but only, I can't remember the specifics of it, only a certain version of Android. There's always a 1 second delay before your sound begins. Pretty sure it's just a bug in Chrome, but we haven't really figured out a way around that one yet. Yeah.
Aside from that bug, what's the latency between initiating the sound and hearing it?
Well, when you set up your Howler object, it'll preload the audio. So if you're not starting the sound immediately when the page starts up, then there should be no latency. Essentially, no latency that the user can perceive. Any other questions? Yeah, yeah, that'll probably change in Howler too because it's not very obvious. But yeah, buffer. If you set buffer to true, it forces HTML5 audio. So the idea was you could buffer the audio because it starts playing before it's completely downloaded. Did you have a question? Okay.
Do anything like the sound quality from mobile devices to lessen the quality for small file size?
Like us specifically with our games, or?
Like, is that a big deal or not a big deal?
Yeah, it is. Especially because the audio needs to load into the memory. So you got to be really careful, like especially with background music. For like sound effects, all of our sound effects combined are less than a meg total, so it's not as much of an issue. But for background music, we've probably got about, I think like 20, 25 megs for background music, so that starts to become more of an issue that you gotta sort of watch for.
Does Howler deal with MIDI at all, or is it strictly about playing pre-rendered audio?
Yeah, no, it's all pre-rendered audio clips. Yeah, there's actually some pretty cool libraries out there that use web audio to do things like that. But Howler's just focused on just playback. Anyone else? All right, well, thanks, everyone.